we are definitely in a transitioning market. Would you agree with that?
100%.
You're on track to do 150 deals this year, right?
I know.
It's not 200, but like it's good. I mean, it's pretty good.
It's all right, right? Decent number.
Share with the audience like how you know, not you think, you know that the market is transitioning.
Listings are sitting on the market for longer.
So days on market is increasing.
2, the comps aren't being supported by the current prices, meaning like if you're going based on comps from 6 months ago and you're pricing a property, even if the property is better or identical, very likely it's selling for less than whatever the comps are. There is friction. I know that is a sign because sellers aren't getting what they want, and when they don't get what they want, they throw tantrums. We're getting asked for larger price reductions. Like we're talking about like $20,000 reductions
for no real reason, right? Other than just like they can.
Well, in one case, they asked for $150,000 on a $3 million property, and I had to look at the seller and basically tell him, "Look, I know it's not ideal, but I don't believe I can get you any better if we went back on the marketplace because of this, this, and this. Even though it's not what you want, you may be better off just taking it." And sure enough, there's a property right next door that's a little bit better condition, priced a little bit higher than what we were in escrow at, and they're sitting on the marketplace.
You're also, because I know we've had conversations with it, and I'm speaking to agents all across the country on a regular basis. The other thing that you're seeing, and I know that others are seeing in the stats, like market kind of data,
100%,
which is like supply and demand. So supply, you can look at inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Supply meaning the amount of homes that are on the market for sale, and inventory. And I know it's not like, this broad kind of everywhere this is the case, because some places it's more than others, and some kind of pockets of the marketplace it's more than others in your specific geographic area. As a whole, though, what you're seeing is across the board, inventory is creeping up, and in some instances going up dramatically year over year. Is that right?
And I would encourage agents to go back, because I don't think I looked at I looked at it briefly, maybe like 30 to 45 days ago, where I received a message from one of my virtual assistants that just said, "Hey, look, last year inventory was this year it's that." I ignored it. I was like, okay, whatever, But then when I actually went back and like looked at them, I was like, oh man, like this is across the board in most of the marketplaces in Ventura County, where inventory has gone up in a lot of cases by like 33%. And demand has either remained flat, or in some cases, it's even come down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're basically like supply's going up and demand is going down. So a key question that I learned how to ask was just like, look, you tell me, like, inventory was X last year. Right now it's Y. Demand was X. Now it's Y. When inventory goes up and demand goes down, what typically happens to prices in those scenarios?
And then be quiet. Yeah. So the way that we're determining and making this like definitive statement, right? Because, I love this quote, and I think it's true. I know it's true. Leaders don't panic, they pivot.
Yeah.
So what we mean by that is that marketplaces dictate strategy. I think our tendency as like operators is like, hey, I found something that works. That means it's going to work all the time. No, that is a quirk in thinking. It's called resulting. And it's not accurate, because environments change and environments dictate strategies, right? So the way that we're able to tell that environments are changing is by monitoring simple things like supply and demand. What's happening with inventory year over year? Is it staying the same? Is it going up? Is it going down? Now, you mentioned to me, like some instances it's 33%. In some marketplaces, it's in like sub pockets in your market is 50% inventory increase year over year. And then the second piece we look at is demand, and demand is reflected in transactions. And this is the hard part, guys. Independent of what you're hearing on the television, independent of what you're seeing on social media, like you have to keep in mind that my experience has been, in being in this business for like 20 years, it took kind of the media a while, like months, 6 months, 8 months, like 6 months, let's say, to recognize like, oh, this is like changing. And it took consumers like a year to really see that it changed, right? Every time I've been involved in like a market transition. And you have to equip yourself with what's true, right? Because these platforms, TV, whatever, like media, they're all designed to either piss you off or scare you. So they oftentimes sensationalize and all the other stuff, but you need to get to like what's true. You need an accurate assessment in order to produce a good outcome. And people are looking to you as an agent for guidance as far as strategy is concerned, as far as like what's happening in the marketplace. So by staying up to date with supply and demand, you can get a clear picture. Now, being that, Jose, you have seen, and we started to see, because we were talking about this like, 6 months ago, right? And was like, yo, we need to start talking about price reductions and the pricing portion listing presentation and presenting offers that come in less than the asking price. Dude, we've been talking about that for like almost 3 months now.
And now it's coming to the surface.
Yeah.
Like,
now because people aren't doing enough volume that they're recognizing that that's what's happening. But now in the handful of deals that they're doing, they're like, holy smokes, this is what's happening. Or they had a bottleneck. So they end up with like 10 listings, nothing selling. Yeah. And then they say things like, oh, well, the marketplace isn't good. I'm like, no, you haven't changed your tactics. The environment's changed. You haven't pivoted, right? So what they end up doing is panicking and thinking, oh, I need to go get a job, when instead they should be pivoting strategically, right? So now that we've kind of, let's say,
determined,
solidified and determined, hey, marketplace is in transition. We don't know where it's going to go. We make directional bets with a high degree of probability. This is the direction it's heading in. When you see inventory rising, you see demand falling, and you see direct experience from the marketplace, like Jose's saying. He's seeing, hey, we got to get price reductions, get offers. Hey, I'm seeing buyers be more aggressive in negotiating, which means that things are changing. Hey, I'm seeing offers come in less than the asking price. Now we need to pivot in terms of strategy. And the pivot has to do with, it begins at the listing presentation. And you've mentioned, Jose, which we've been talking about and we've been teaching to everybody, is augmenting that presentation by getting really good at framing the conversation before you give them the data. And the way you've been doing that, and the way we've been teaching others to do it, is by presenting some stats. So maybe like talk to the audience or walk them through like specifically how you've augmented your approach.
Yeah, so I actually started bringing up market stats because these are things that I started hearing, or I'm hearing at the listing presentations right now. What I'm hearing is, I'm hearing more of like, oh, well, that seller like undersold their property, or a lot of sellers undersold their property. And the question is, okay, like what if I told you that they didn't actually undersell it, and it's more a reflection of where the marketplace is at this time, at this present time right now? Because they're saying that they'll look at that listing like, I don't know why that seller must have been like really in a hurry or sold it. Now, I was very vividly having a conversation with somebody yesterday who's an expired. And I'm like, what if I told you that it wasn't? I'm like, have you noticed that properties are selling for less than what you would have thought they would have sold maybe like 6 months ago? And he's like, yeah, like, to be honest, I was looking at properties. I'm like, I can't believe that they sold at that price. I'm like, do you ever ask yourself why that is happening? Meaning if that's like a one-off type of situation, or if there's something bigger happening. He's like, well, yeah, I was kind of wondering. I'm like, can I share with you some things that are happening in the marketplace right now that I think will help you understand just market dynamics as a whole?
Well, and notice the approach there. So instead of telling somebody, hey, the marketplace is shifting, it's changing, it's not the way that it was before, instead you asked a series of 2 to 3 questions
to set it up.
And now basically. He's way more
I've set it up.
And now he's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. It's like, well, my experience is that everybody has an opinion. And anybody who suggests that they have a crystal ball and they can tell you emphatically what's going to happen, I mean, they're not being honest, and you should probably run in the other direction. I'm not pretending to have a crystal ball. At the same time, my experience is when we look at data, the numbers don't lie, and they paint a picture. What they do is they give us a direction, right? And my experience is that once I understand that data and the picture that it's painting and the direction, it's helpful for me because then I can make decisions in accordance with that, right? And that'll increase the chances that I'll get the outcomes that I want. So let's take a look at some of this information. And I believe in doing so, we'll see the reason why that's happening. what we just described, and we can see direction. And then from there, we'll have some options at our disposal, and whatever you decide, I'll support you. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, cool. And then you go over supply and demand and this and that. And you know what I mean? And then you ask questions. So based on this information, anything's possible. At the same time, two questions I have for you. One, are you beginning to see why homes are selling for a little bit less than what they were 6 months ago? He'll be like, yeah, good. And second question, anything's possible. Question is, what's more probable? Does it seem more probable that in the next 30, 60, 90, 120 days, the amount that you can get for this property will go up substantially? Or does it seem more probable in light of the data we've just reviewed, with inventory climbing by 33%, demand staying the same, and with what we've seen happening with other homes, that if we wait, we'd actually potentially have to get less money? And then shut up. And they'll tell you. But this is how, when you're framing that conversation, I believe that you're having that conversation, like you're going over those stats before you even get into the market analysis, correct? And that's how you've changed the approach, because that's what we're sharing with people.
In some cases, I'm doing it before, and in some cases, I'm doing it as like halfway through the analysis.
And how do you determine which one? Because I know like how I do it, but like how do you do it?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about how. I think it just depends what the comps support. Meaning,
I think it's partly that. It's like what comes up for me. It's partly what the comps support. It's partly what I gathered from the prequal. And it's partly how kind of adamant they were, or, you know what I mean? Like the kind of friction that was presented around price. Right. So I think with all of those factors, so in other words, like if you go in and when you ask them like, hey, my goal and objective is to help you to net as much as you possibly can. You strike me to be someone who's, pretty savvy. I'm sure you've gone online, looked at some of these estimates of value. Did you have an idea at all of realistically what you were thinking in terms of price?
Yeah, so it has a lot to do with it. And then in some cases, I'm not even going over the stats. Just like I had a presentation where the seller's like, yeah, I want 680. And at 680, it's a steal for the property. I mean, it's a great price.
Yeah, like there's no reason to even have the conversation.
So, and this is why I, like in some cases, I tell people there's certain things that are situational in the listing presentation that you only do when the situation requires it. And there's certain things that you don't have to do at the listing presentation. And market stats, it's one of those things that is situational, just depending on whatever the client's expectations are and where is the marketplace at right now, basically.
Yeah, I think the general thing that we want everybody to get clear on is that, one, marketplace is in transition, for sure, right? Two, you have to be cognizant of that and be augmenting your approach. Augmenting the approach in pre-qual, making sure that people are 8, 9s, and 10s. I would propose even 9s and 10s, because in this environment, if they're not highly motivated, they're not going to do what's necessary to get it sold, which is lower the price. Second thing you got to augment is how you're presenting price, getting really good at managing that frame. So if you're on a pre-qual and somebody tells you, yeah, I want 650, and you're like, that's a steal. There's no reason for me to kind of go into that framing conversation. But if there's somebody that's like, yo, I don't want to give it away, and I'm not going to give it away, and my neighbor I know sold 6 months ago for this, then yeah, with a high degree of probability, I should have that conversation before, set that frame really clearly before we get into the pricing.
100%. And even with that expired, I had it over the phone with them. I'm like, look, like, have you noticed why, like, some of your neighbors, like, have you seen what some of your neighbors have sold and asked yourself, like, why do they sell at that price? Or that seems awfully low, like, for the features and benefits that they're having. And he's like, yeah. I even asked at a presentation, I asked the homeowner, because the property right next door is sitting next to him and it's on the market. I'm like, have you wondered why, like, or have you asked yourself this question? Like, why is my neighbor's property sitting when I would have thought that it would have sold by now? And he's like, I'm wondering the same thing. I'm like, what if I told you that there's certain market conditions that are playing a factor into that? And by you understanding these market conditions, you can actually position yourself in a better position to actually be able to sell the property. And he's like, well, that would be amazing. So even with the guy, like, so what I'm kind of going over, and this is where I think that it's very important for agents to go back for their market stats instead of listening to the news, and his property was in Fillmore. And in Fillmore, the inventory hasn't gone up like crazy. And I said that to him. I'm like, look, it hasn't reflected in Fillmore yet, but look at what's going on in some of the other cities around, and look at what's going on in the market as a whole. So for some markets, it takes a little bit longer to transition, basically. For some markets, it takes a little bit longer to transition. So in Ventura County, we've had 1,100 homes last year around this time. Right now, we have 1,900 homes. 35% increase in the number of homes available. Now, that wouldn't be a problem, Aaron, if demand increased by the same amount. Meaning, like, more inventory is not a problem if demand goes up. But look at what's happened to inventory. Inventory last year around this time, 450 homes. Right now, 455 homes. Literally, demand has stayed flat. So let me ask you this. If you have 35% more homes for sale and demand has virtually remained flat, meaning not improved at all, what do you think typically happens to prices in those scenarios?
Shutting up. And then they're going to be like, well, yeah, I guess they go down. So it sounds like you're beginning to realize
why.
You're beginning to see why homes now in this market, like currently, because price is a snapshot in time, are selling for less than what they were 6 months ago. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But I'm not going to give it away. Great. I'm not here to help you to give it away. I'm not in the business of giving away homes. We're not going to start with yours. So what I'd like to do is just ask you a couple. And by the way, we're on the same team, because the more we help you sell it for, the more we get compensated. So I want you to sell it for as much as possible. So let me ask you some questions just to ensure that I'm clear on your motive for selling, why you want to do it, and why it's important to you, so we can determine the best option for you, and whatever you decide is okay. Fair enough? Yeah. So my first question is the home's lovely. It's in a great geographic area. Refresh my memory, like specifically, how would your life improve in some way if you sold it? What would be the benefit to you personally? And be quiet. And let's say that you knew that through no fault of your own or mine, that just because of a transitioning market, if you made a decision to wait, you would have to wait for an extended period of time, maybe 12, 24, 36 months before you could get the price that you felt more comfortable with. Would that be okay with you? Is it an option for you to rent the home and still move? Is it an option for you to keep it as a secondary home? Is it an option for you to stay put and make the best of it? So you get clarity around that, right? And then let's say they decide like, no, we're going to sell it. Okay. So being that you've decided that what's in your best interest is to get it sold. In terms of how we position it price-wise, we have a couple options at our disposal. And I'm going to review them with you with the goal and objective of you ultimately making the decision that you feel is best for you and your family on which one would serve you best. And whatever you decide is okay. Fair? Fair. So the first option that we have at our disposal is we can do what a lot of your neighbors have been doing, which is resist what's happening in the marketplace and position the property higher. Perhaps what homes were selling for 6 months ago. You know what the great news about that, Jose, is? What's that? The neighbors have done us a gigantic favor. They've already tested the market for us, and it's not working for them. So in other words, here's one that we agreed is a model match, size, square footage, all that, of the one that sold 6 months ago for $650. They're asking $650. And do you see that DOM there? You know what that stands for? What's that? Days on market. How long have they been on the market? 75 days, and they haven't sold it yet. Now let me ask you, Jose, what do you think, and watch me, you ready? Subtly, what do you think the marketplace is telling them about their price and product?
Yeah.
And just be quiet. It's uncomfortable, but he'll be like, well, I guess that's too high. I agree.
You're shaking your head no very subtly.
Very subtly. Not like, but I'm like, what do you think the buying public is telling them about their price and product? We are observing everything at all times. We just don't recognize it. So when I give you this subtle, have you ever asked somebody a question and they don't know the answer, but they're almost looking to you for like, can you give me a clue or something? Can you give me some guidance? So you're just like, yeah, what do you think the buying public is telling them about their price and product? And they're like, well, I guess it's not working. That's right. And we can learn from that data. It's very helpful and useful. Now, the other issue with that strategy is you see it took 75 days. They still don't have a contract yet. Let me ask you this. What would happen on the outside chance if we were still sitting here 75, 100, 125 days from now and it wasn't sold? What would that mean for you and your family? Quiet. Man, that wouldn't be good. Okay. So that's something to consider with regards to that strategy. The second strategy and approach is we can position the property in alignment with where the market not only is, where it's going. Because remember, price is a snapshot in time. And by doing that, what I mean is we would position it a little bit less than what has sold and closed most recently. And even though that may seem counterintuitive, Jose, what ends up happening is if in doing so, that's a wonderful, like the best value on the market right now in Camarillo, like what do you think is going to happen in the first week?
Probably,
Yeah,
lots of activity.
Yeah, lots of activities and offers, perhaps more than one. And who usually wins when you have more than one offer on the table, the seller or the buyer?
Seller.
Yeah, and why is that?
Competition.
That's right. So you end up with the best terms and conditions, right? So what ends up coming to the surface is the absolute most that somebody's willing to pay. Because as you know, I do not need to tell you what something's worth is what somebody's willing to pay for it. So whatever you decide is okay, my question to you is based on what you're looking to accomplish and why, in light of this data and information that we see clearly the direction that the marketplace is going in, and now we understand why those homes are sitting on the market and not selling versus the ones that sold 6 months ago, and based on the time frame you'd like to make this happen in, which one of these two pricing strategies do you think would serve you best and help you to get the most in the most reasonable amount of time?
Yeah.
And then be quiet. But that's, you have to be like, bro, you have to be a tactician with that. You have to be like, what? Because I want everybody to be clear. I know you know this because of the volume that you're doing. This is a real, if you think as an agent, you could ignore what me and Jose are saying right now, ignore it at your own peril. I'm telling you, bro, if you do not get really, really good at this, it'll be, I got to go get a job. Like that's what it's going to be because you won't be able to.
Well, there's agents that are getting jobs already.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had, in the last 60 days, I've had 4 calls with agents, some with tears, some not, about having to go get a job. That's not hyperbole.
I got a text message from a client and he's like, it was a reel and it said, this is what's happening in the real estate market right now. And it talked about the amount of sales in comparison to like 2008, 2009, how it's like half of the amount of sales at that time. He's like, if you've got an agent, if your agent's killing into this market, he's a gangster. and the client sent it to me. I was like, thanks, man.
That's good.
People are preferring properties where they don't have to do work to them. In order to get a decent payment, they're coming in with a very large down payment.